Pregnant wife prepares surprise dinner and catches her husband kissing his mistress in the bedroom. The kitchen timer chimed softly as Madeline Carter pulled the rosemary lamb from the oven, its golden crust glistening under the warm pendant lights of her Denver mansion. At 33, she moved with the careful grace of someone carrying precious cargo, 6 months of hope, dreams, and everything she'd fought for wrapped in the gentle curve of her belly. "Perfect," she whispered, setting the roast on the marble countertop. Her fingers traced the edge of the dining table she'd spent an hour setting with their wedding china, the same delicate pattern they'd chosen during their honeymoon in Tuscany 4 years ago. Fresh white peonies, Bradley's favorite, crowned the centerpiece, their sweet fragrance mixing with the aroma of herbs and garlic. The house felt different today, lighter somehow. Maybe it was the afternoon sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, or maybe it was the secret she'd been carrying for 2 weeks, a secret that would change everything. Again, Madeline's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, where their daughter grew stronger each day. After 3 years of fertility treatments, countless appointments, and whispered prayers in hospital waiting rooms, she finally had everything she'd dreamed of. A successful husband, a beautiful home, and now the daughter they'd both wanted so desperately. She glanced at the clock on the stainless steel refrigerator. 4:47 p.m. Bradley had promised to be home by 5. Unusual for him, but he'd seemed different lately. More attentive, more present. "I want to spend more time with you," he'd said that morning, kissing her forehead before leaving for the office. Especially now. The small velvet box sat hidden behind the fruit bowl, containing the tiniest pair of pink ballet slippers she'd found at the boutique downtown. Inside, a folded note read, "Daddy, I can't wait to dance with you. Love, Harper." She'd chosen the name weeks ago, whispering it to her belly during quiet moments when Bradley was away on business trips. Madeline smoothed her silk blouse, the periwinkle blue one Bradley had bought her for their anniversary, and checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and despite the exhaustion that came with pregnancy, her green eyes sparkled with anticipation. She looked happy, truly happy. The sound of gravel crunching in the driveway made her heart skip. He was early. She heard his car door slam, followed by another door. Madeline paused, listening. Footsteps on the front porch, then the familiar jingle of keys. But there were voices. Bradley's deep laugh mixing with something lighter, more melodic. Female. Probably just Alyssa dropping off work files, she murmured to herself, though something cold settled in her chest. His assistant had been coming by more frequently lately, always with some urgent document or presentation that couldn't wait until morning. The front door opened and Madeline heard Bradley's voice drifting up from the foyer. "The house smells incredible," he said, but he wasn't talking to her. "She's been cooking all afternoon." A woman's laugh responded, bright, carefree, younger than Madeline's own. "Should we go upstairs first?" Bradley's voice was different now, lower, more intimate. Madeline's hand tightened around the velvet box. The logical part of her mind offered explanations. Work stress and innocent conversation. Her own pregnancy hormones making her paranoid. But her feet were already moving toward the stairs, carrying her up the oak steps she'd climbed thousands of times before. The hallway seemed longer than usual, stretching endlessly toward their bedroom door. She could hear movement inside, rustling fabric, muffled voices, the creak of their bed frame. With the tiny ballet slippers clutched in her trembling hand, Madeline reached for the brass doorknob, the same handle she'd turned every night for 4 years, entering the sanctuary they'd built together. She turned it slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs, and stepped into the room where her perfect life was about to shatter forever. What would you do if you discovered your partner's betrayal at the most vulnerable moment of your life? Would you have the strength to walk away, or would you fight for what you thought was yours? The door swung open with a soft creak, and Madeline's world collapsed in the span of a heartbeat. Bradley stood by their king-sized bed, his shirt unbuttoned, his hair disheveled in a way that spoke of eager hands running through it. But it wasn't his appearance that stopped her breathing. It was the woman pressed against him, her manicured fingers tracing the line of his jaw with practiced familiarity. Alyssa Whitman, 26 years old, with platinum blonde hair that caught the afternoon light streaming through the bedroom windows. The same woman who'd sat in their kitchen just 2 weeks ago, discussing Bradley's business schedule while Madeline served her homemade coffee cake. The same woman who'd complimented the nursery wallpaper and asked thoughtful questions about baby names. They were kissing with the kind of desperate intensity that spoke of stolen moments and hidden desires. Alyssa's emerald green blouse, the one Madeline had admired during their last office Christmas party, lay crumpled on the hardwood floor beside Bradley's tie. The tie Madeline had straightened that morning before kissing him goodbye. "I've missed you," Bradley murmured against Alyssa's neck, his voice thick with longing. "These past few weeks have been torture." "I know," Alyssa breathed back, her fingers working at his belt buckle. "But we have time now. She's downstairs cooking, isn't she? Playing the perfect little housewife." The words hit Madeline like physical blows. Perfect little housewife. The dismissive tone, the casual cruelty. It was as if her entire existence had been reduced to a punchline in someone else's joke. The velvet box slipped from her numb fingers, landing on the carpet with a soft thud. The tiny ballet slippers scattered across the floor, pink satin catching the light like pieces of a broken dream. Bradley's head snapped up at the sound, his eyes widening when he saw her standing in the doorway. His face went ashen, cycling through shock, panic, and something that might have been relief, as if being caught had lifted a weight from his shoulders. "Madeline," he breathed, stepping away from Alyssa so quickly she stumbled backward. "I can explain." "Don't." The word came out as a whisper, but it carried the weight of every shattered promise, every lie, every moment of intimacy that had been built on deception. Madeline's hand moved instinctively to her belly, protecting the life growing inside her from the toxic revelation unfolding around them. Alyssa had the grace to look embarrassed, hastily grabbing her blouse from the floor, but there was something else in her expression, a flash of defiance as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "Madeline, I'm sorry you had to find out like this," she said, her voice steadier than it had any right to be. "But we didn't plan for this to happen." "Didn't plan?" Madeline's voice was still barely above a whisper, but it carried a sharp edge that made both of them flinch. "How long?" Bradley ran his hands through his hair, the same gesture he made when he was stressed about work deadlines. But this wasn't about quarterly reports or investor meetings. This was about the systematic destruction of everything she'd believed in. "Madeline, please let me," he started. "How long?" she repeated, her green eyes fixed on his face with laser intensity. 6 months, Alyssa answered when Bradley remained silent. She was buttoning her blouse with quick, efficient movements, her chin tilted defiantly. "Since the Phoenix conference." Phoenix. Madeline remembered that trip. Bradley had been gone for 5 days, and she'd surprised him with a care package filled with his favorite snacks and a love letter telling him how much she missed him. He'd called her every night, describing the boring meetings and terrible hotel food, painting himself as the devoted husband counting down the hours until he could come home to her. The same week she'd gotten the positive pregnancy test. The same week she'd cried happy tears in their bathroom, planning the perfect way to surprise him with the news. The same week he'd been falling in love with someone else. 6 months, Madeline repeated, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. "The entire time I've been pregnant." Bradley's face crumpled with what might have been genuine remorse, but Madeline felt nothing but cold clarity washing over her. 6 months of lies. 6 months of coming home to her while carrying the scent of another woman. 6 months of making love to her while thinking of someone else. "The baby," she said suddenly, her voice growing stronger. "Every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, every time we heard her heartbeat, you were with her." "It's not what you think," Bradley said desperately, taking a step toward her. "I love you, I love our baby. This thing with Alyssa, it's complicated. Complicated." Madeline tasted the word like poison. "I'm carrying your child, and you're in love with your assistant. What's complicated about that?" The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of everything that could never be unsaid. Outside, a neighbor's lawn mower hummed peacefully, the sound of suburban normalcy carrying on while her world crumbled. Madeline looked down at the scattered ballet slippers, then back at the 2 people who had just destroyed her faith in everything she'd held sacred. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, calm, and absolutely final. "I want you both out of my house now." Madeline's hands trembled as she grabbed her purse from the kitchen counter, her keys jangling like wind chimes in the sudden silence of the house. The lamb roast sat cooling on the marble island, its perfect golden crust now a mockery of the celebration that would never happen. The dining table remained set for 2, white peonies still fragrant, wine glasses catching the late afternoon light. She could hear Bradley's voice from upstairs, urgent, pleading, desperate. "Alyssa, wait. Let me handle this. She's pregnant. She's not thinking clearly." Not thinking clearly. The phrase echoed in her mind as she walked past the family photos lining the hallway. Their wedding day, vacations to Aspen, the ultrasound picture from last month that Bradley had insisted on framing. In every image, she saw a woman who'd been living a lie without knowing it. The front door felt heavier than usual as she pulled it open, stepping into the crisp Colorado evening. Her silver SUV sat in the circular driveway, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she'd left her keys. Then she felt them, solid and real in her palm, grounding her in the present moment. Behind her, she heard Bradley's footsteps on the hardwood floor. "Madeline, please, don't leave like this. We need to talk." She didn't turn around. Couldn't turn around. If she looked at his face, the face she'd kissed goodbye that morning, she might crumble completely. Instead, she climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, her movements mechanical but precise. The drive to Fort Collins usually took 45 minutes, but tonight it felt like crossing an ocean. The familiar landscape of suburban Denver blurred past her windows. Strip malls and coffee shops. The park where she'd imagined pushing Harper on swings. The pediatrician's office where she'd scheduled her first appointment. Her phone buzzed against the passenger seat. Bradley's name flashed across the screen, followed by a text message. "Please don't do this, come home. We can fix this. Fix this." As if 6 months of deception could be repaired with the right words, the right apology, the right amount of remorse. Madeline deleted the message without reading it fully and focused on the road ahead. The baby kicked suddenly, a sharp jab against her ribs that made her gasp. "I know, sweetheart," she whispered, her first words since leaving the house. "I know you feel it too." More messages buzzed through as she drove. Bradley, then Alyssa, then Bradley again. She turned the phone face down and pressed harder on the accelerator. The mountains loomed larger as she approached Fort Collins. Their snow-capped peaks turned pink in the dying light. Home. Real home. The small ranch house where she'd grown up, where her father Thomas still lived, surrounded by law books and crossword puzzles and the kind of unshakable moral certainty that had guided her entire life. Until today. Her father's house sat on Maple Street, a tree-lined avenue where neighbors knew each other's names and borrowed sugar across back fences. The porch light was already on. He always turned it on at sunset, a habit from her childhood that had never changed. His blue sedan sat in the driveway next to the carefully tended rose bushes her mother had planted 20 years ago. Madeline parked behind his car and sat for a moment, staring at the house that had always meant safety. The white shutters needed painting, and the front steps sagged slightly, but it was real in a way her Denver mansion had never been. Authentic. Honest. She tried to stand, but her legs felt unsteady. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation and the drive was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her. The baby kicked again, more gently this time, as if sensing her distress. "We're going to be okay," she whispered to her belly, though she wasn't sure she believed it yet. The front door opened before she could knock, and her father emerged wearing his favorite cardigan and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. Thomas Bell had always been able to sense when his daughters needed him, even from 45 miles away. "Madeline?" His voice carried the concern of a man who'd spent 30 years reading people's faces in courtrooms. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" She opened her mouth to explain, to find words for the devastation that had torn through her perfect life, but all that came out was a sound she barely recognized as her own. Raw, broken, and utterly defeated. Thomas crossed the porch in 3 quick strides and pulled her into his arms, the same arms that had held her through skinned knees and broken hearts and every disappointment of her 33 years. But this was different. This was the kind of pain that changed everything. "He's been cheating on me," she whispered against his shoulder. "The whole time I've been pregnant, with his assistant." Thomas's arms tightened around her and she felt him go rigid with the kind of anger that came from watching someone hurt the person you'd die to protect. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the steel beneath it. "You're home now," he said simply. "You're safe now." For the first time since opening that bedroom door, Madeline allowed herself to believe it might be true. The cramping started at 2:17 a.m. Madeline had been lying in her childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars she'd stuck to the ceiling in 7th grade, when the first wave of pain twisted through her abdomen like a knife. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the scene in the bedroom over and over. Bradley's hands on Alyssa's skin, the casual cruelty in the younger woman's voice, the scattered pink ballet slippers on the carpet. "No, no, no," she whispered into the darkness, her hands instinctively moving to protect her belly. The baby had been quiet since they'd arrived at her father's house, and now this. Sharp, rhythmic contractions that sent panic coursing through her veins. She tried to breathe through it, remembering the Lamaze techniques from her pregnancy books. But this wasn't labor pain. This was something else. Something wrong. Her body was responding to the emotional trauma, and Harper was caught in the middle. Dad. The word tore from her throat as another contraction hit. Stronger this time. Thomas appeared in her doorway within seconds, his gray hair disheveled, his reading glasses askew. He'd been a light sleeper since her mother died 5 years ago, always alert for trouble. One look at his daughter's face told him everything he needed to know. Hospital, he said simply, already reaching for the car keys he'd left on her dresser. Now, the drive to Poudre Valley Hospital passed in a blur of streetlights, and Thomas's steady voice reassuring her that everything would be okay. Madeline gripped the door handle with white knuckles, each bump in the road sending fresh waves of pain through her body. It's too early, she gasped between contractions. She's not ready. I'm only 24 weeks. Don't think like that, Thomas said firmly, his lawyer's voice cutting through her panic. We're going to get you help and you're both going to be fine. But Madeline could hear the fear beneath his certainty. 24 weeks. Barely viable. If Harper decided to come now, because of what Bradley had done to them, the emergency room smelled like disinfectant and fear. A nurse with kind eyes and efficient hands wheeled Madeline into a curtained cubicle, asking questions in a calm, professional tone that somehow made everything worse. Yes, she was experiencing contractions. No, she hadn't fallen. Yes, she'd experienced severe emotional stress today. Severe emotional stress. Such clinical words for the complete destruction of everything she'd believed in. Dr. Nowak arrived 15 minutes later. A woman in her 50s with steady hands and the kind of reassuring presence that came from delivering babies for 20 years. She examined Madeline with gentle thoroughness, her expression revealing nothing. The contractions are real, she said finally, but they're not labor contractions. Your cervix is closed, and the baby's heartbeat is strong. This is your body's response to acute stress, what we call false labor. Relief flooded through Madeline so completely that she started crying. Months of held-back tears finally breaking free. Harper was safe. Whatever else Bradley had destroyed, their daughter was still safe. However, Dr. Nowak continued, her tone growing more serious. Your blood pressure is dangerously elevated, and your cortisol levels are through the roof. Prolonged stress like this can be harmful to both you and the baby. We need to talk about coping strategies. Thomas squeezed Madeline's hand as the doctor explained the risks: preterm labor, low birth weight, developmental issues. Every word felt like another failure, another way she'd let her daughter down by trusting the wrong man. I have a counselor I'd like you to see, Dr. Nowak said, scribbling on her prescription pad. Dr. Winters specializes in pregnancy-related trauma, and I want to see you back here in 3 days for monitoring. As they drove home in the pre-dawn darkness, Thomas finally asked the question that had been burning in his eyes since she'd arrived on his doorstep. What do you want to do about Bradley? Madeline stared out the passenger window at the mountains silhouetted against the lightening sky. Her phone had been buzzing nonstop. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, all from Bradley. She hadn't read any of them. I want to disappear, she said quietly. I want to change my number, delete my social media, and pretend I never met him. Good, Thomas said, his voice carrying the hard satisfaction of a man who'd spent his career seeking justice. But first, we're going to make sure you and Harper are protected legally. No one gets to walk away from their responsibilities without consequences. I don't want his money, Madeline said quickly. This isn't about money, sweetheart. This is about making sure he can't hurt you anymore, and making sure he understands that actions have consequences. Back at the house, Thomas made her chamomile tea while she sat at the kitchen table, finally feeling safe enough to think clearly. The cramping had stopped completely, and Harper was moving normally again. Gentle kicks that felt like reassurance. Her phone buzzed with another text from Bradley. Please call me. I know you're hurt, but we can work through this. I love you. For the first time since opening that bedroom door, Madeline felt something other than pain. She felt anger. Clean, pure, righteous anger. She typed back a single message. Lose this number. My lawyer will be in touch. Then she blocked his number, deleted his contact, and erased 4 years of text message history with 3 quick taps. How does it feel? Thomas asked, watching her from the kitchen counter. Madeline looked down at her phone, silent for the first time in hours, then at her belly where their daughter slept peacefully, no longer disturbed by her mother's stress. "Like the first day of the rest of my life," she said. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she meant it. Dr. Winter's office felt nothing like Madeline had expected. Instead of the sterile, clinical atmosphere she'd imagined, the space was warm and inviting. Soft lighting, comfortable armchairs, and windows that overlooked a small garden where wind chimes sang softly in the breeze. "Thank you for coming," Dr. Winters said, settling into the chair across from Madeline. She was younger than expected, maybe 40, with gentle brown eyes and the kind of presence that made people feel instantly at ease. "Dr. Nowak told me a bit about your situation. How are you feeling today?" Madeline shifted in her seat, her hand automatically moving to her belly where Harper seemed to be having a particularly active morning. "Tired," she admitted. "Angry. Confused. Like I don't know who I am anymore." "That's completely normal," Dr. Winters said, making a note on her tablet. "Betrayal during pregnancy is particularly traumatic because it attacks your sense of safety at the most vulnerable time in your life. You're grieving multiple losses simultaneously. Your marriage, your trust, your vision of the future. I keep thinking I should have known," Madeline said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. 6 months. How do you miss something like that for 6 months? "Because you trusted him," Dr. Winters replied simply. "Trust isn't stupidity, Madeline. It's the foundation of every healthy relationship. He violated that trust, not the other way around." For the next hour, they talked about the signs Madeline had dismissed. Bradley's longer work hours, his distraction during conversations, the way he'd started showering immediately when he came home. Things that could have had innocent explanations, but now formed a pattern of deception that made her stomach turn. "I want to ask you something," Dr. Winters said as their session wound down. "What did you do before you got married? What made you feel most like yourself?" Madeline paused, surprised by the question. "I taught prenatal classes at the community center," she said slowly. "I loved helping women prepare for motherhood, especially first-time moms who were scared. I had this blog too, nothing big, just sharing information about fertility and pregnancy health." "What happened to the blog?" Bradley said it was unprofessional, that potential business partners might see it and think less of him. The words tasted bitter now. "So I took it down." Dr. Winters leaned forward slightly. How would it feel to start writing again? That evening, Madeline sat at her father's kitchen table with his old laptop, staring at a blank document. Thomas was grading papers in the living room. He substitute taught at the local high school to keep busy, and the house was quiet, except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. She started typing. 3 days ago, my world ended. Not dramatically, not with screaming or violence, but with the quiet devastation of discovering that the person I trusted most had been lying to me for months. The words flowed easier than she'd expected, each sentence a small release of the pressure that had been building in her chest. She wrote about the pink ballet slippers scattered on the floor, about the dinner that went cold while her marriage died upstairs, about the fear that Harper might pay the price for her father's betrayal. She wrote until her eyes burned and her back ached, until Harper's movements reminded her it was time to eat something. When she finally stopped, she had 3 pages of raw, honest truth. "How's it going in here?" Thomas asked, appearing in the doorway with 2 cups of hot chocolate. "I'm writing again," Madeline said, surprised by how good the words felt in her mouth. "About what?" "About this. About what happened. About how it feels to have your life explode and still have to keep breathing." Thomas set the hot chocolate beside her and squeezed her shoulder. "Your mother always said you had a gift for helping people feel less alone. Maybe that's exactly what you need to do right now." 2 days later, Madeline's sister Camille arrived from Seattle with a suitcase full of maternity clothes and a fierce determination to help her sister rebuild. Camille was 2 years older, a marketing executive with sharp business instincts and zero tolerance for men who disappointed the women in her family. "Show me what you've been writing," she said, settling onto the couch beside Madeline. Madeline hesitated, then opened the laptop. Over the past few days, she'd written 6 essays about betrayal, about finding strength during pregnancy, about the myth of the perfect family, raw, honest pieces that made her feel exposed but also strangely powerful. Camille read in silence, her expression growing more animated with each page. When she finished, she looked up with eyes that sparkled with possibility. "This is incredible," she said. "You need to share this." "I can't," Madeline protested. "What if Bradley sees it? What if people judge me?" "Let him see it," Camille said fiercely. "Let the whole world see it. Do you know how many women are going through exactly what you're going through? How many are sitting in doctors' offices right now wondering if the stress is hurting their babies, feeling like they're the only ones whose perfect life turned out to be a lie? Madeline looked down at her laptop screen, at the words she'd poured out in the quiet hours of early morning, words that felt too personal, too vulnerable to share with strangers. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good," Camille said, pulling out her phone. "Being scared means it matters. Now, what should we call your new TikTok account?" That night, Madeline lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the simple profile Camille had helped her create. No pictures of Bradley, no mentions of their life together, just a pregnant woman named Madeline, sharing her truth one story at a time. Tomorrow she would post her first video. Tomorrow she would stop hiding. Tonight Harper kicked against her ribs as if to say, "I'm ready when you are, Mama." For the first time in a week, Madeline smiled as she drifted off to sleep. The first video was terrifying. Madeline sat in her childhood bedroom, her phone propped against a stack of books, her heart hammering as she stared at the red record button. She'd spent 3 hours that morning trying to find the courage to press it, writing and rewriting what she wanted to say. "Hi," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Madeline, and I'm 25 weeks pregnant. 3 weeks ago, I thought I had the perfect life, perfect husband, perfect house, perfect future planned out for our daughter." She paused, her hand moving instinctively to her belly where Harper was doing gentle somersaults. "Then I found him in our bedroom with his assistant, and I realized that sometimes the life you think you're living is just a beautiful lie someone else constructed around you." The words came easier after that, flowing like water through a broken dam. She talked about the dinner that went cold, about the pink ballet slippers scattered on the floor, about driving through the night to her father's house with her world collapsing in the rearview mirror. "I'm not sharing this for sympathy," she said, looking directly into the camera. "I'm sharing it because somewhere out there, there's another woman who's questioning her instincts, wondering if she's imagining things, making excuses for behavior that deep down she knows is wrong. Trust yourself, you're not crazy, you're not paranoid, and you're stronger than you know." She posted it before she could change her mind, then immediately closed the app and spent the rest of the day helping her father organize his law books. Anything to keep from obsessing over views and comments. By evening, the video had been watched 1,200 times. By the next morning, it was at 15,000. "Look at this," Camille said, bursting into the kitchen where Madeline was eating breakfast and trying to ignore her phone. "Look at these comments." She scrolled through hundreds of responses. Women sharing their own stories, offering support, expressing gratitude for Madeline's honesty. Messages like, "I needed to hear this today," and "You just saved my sanity," and "Thank you for making me feel less alone." "There's a woman in Texas who says her husband has been working late for months," Camille read. "Another one in Ohio who found suspicious charges on their credit card." "Madeline, you're giving these women permission to trust their instincts." The second video was easier. Madeline talked about the signs she'd ignored, the way Bradley had started showering immediately when he came home, his sudden interest in upgrading his wardrobe, the mysterious calls he'd take in another room. She spoke directly to the camera, her voice growing stronger with each confession. "We tell ourselves stories to survive," she said. "He's working hard for our future. He's stressed about the business. He's just distracted by the pregnancy. But sometimes the story we're telling ourselves is keeping us trapped in someone else's lie." That video hit 50,000 views in 24 hours. The third video was about pregnancy and betrayal, how discovering infidelity while carrying your partner's child felt like a special kind of torture. She talked about the guilt, the fear that stress would harm the baby, the impossible choice between protecting your child and protecting your own sanity. "I ended up in the hospital with false labor contractions," she admitted, her voice steady despite the painful memory. "My body was trying to reject the trauma, even if it meant putting my daughter at risk. That's when I realized that staying in a toxic situation wasn't protecting her. It was endangering both of us." The comments section exploded. Women shared stories of panic attacks during pregnancy, of partners who abandoned them during medical emergencies, of feeling like they had to choose between their babies and their own well-being. Madeline found herself responding to comments late into the night, offering support and encouragement to strangers who felt like sisters. By the end of the week, she had gained 28,000 followers. "This is incredible," Camille said, showing Madeline the analytics on her phone. "Your engagement rate is through the roof. People aren't just watching, they're sharing, commenting, sending this to their friends." Madeline stared at the numbers, overwhelmed by the response. I never expected this. You're giving voice to something women experience but rarely talk about openly, Thomas said from his spot at the kitchen table, where he'd been watching his daughter's transformation with quiet pride. You're turning your pain into purpose. That night, Madeline filmed her most personal video yet. She talked about the moment she'd walked into that bedroom, about the sound the ballet slippers made when they hit the floor, about the way betrayal felt like a physical wound that no one else could see. I want to tell you something, she said, looking directly into the camera with eyes that sparkled with newfound determination. That moment, that terrible, devastating moment when your world explodes, it's not the end of your story. It's not even the worst thing that's going to happen to you. You know what the worst thing would be? Staying, accepting it, teaching your children that this is what love looks like. She paused, her hand moving to her belly where Harper seemed to be listening. I'm having a daughter, she continued, her voice growing stronger. And I will not raise her in a house built on lies. I will not teach her that a woman's job is to make excuses for a man's bad behavior. I will not show her that love means staying quiet when someone is hurting you. The video went viral overnight. By morning it had been viewed over 200,000 times, shared across platforms, and featured in a compilation video that pushed her follower count past 50,000. Brands started reaching out. Interview requests arrived in her inbox. Other content creators wanted to collaborate. But the message that mattered most came from a woman named Lisa in Portland. Because of your videos, I confronted my husband about his affair yesterday. I'm filing for divorce today. Thank you for showing me that I deserve better. Madeline read the message 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness this time, but of something she hadn't felt in weeks. Purpose. Bradley had taken her trust, her home, her vision of the future, but he couldn't take this. Her voice, her truth, her ability to help other women find their own strength. For the first time since her world had collapsed, Madeline felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The call came on a Tuesday morning, while Madeline was filming her daily video about navigating pregnancy alone. Her phone buzzed with an unknown Denver number, and something made her answer despite her usual policy of screening calls. Madeline, it's Janet Morrison from Morrison & Associates. I represent your husband's company. Madeline felt her stomach tighten. Bradley's legal team was reaching out. That couldn't be good news. My ex-husband, she corrected coolly, settling into the rocking chair by her bedroom window. What can I do for you? There's been some concern about your recent social media activity. The company is worried about potential damage to Mr. Carter's reputation and the impact on business relationships. Madeline almost laughed. Are you calling to ask me to stop telling the truth? We're calling to discuss a possible arrangement. Financial compensation in exchange for removing the content and maintaining discretion about your marriage. No. The word came out sharp and final. I'm not interested in being bought off. Ms. Carter, I think you should know that your videos are having real consequences. Mr. Carter has lost 2 major investors this week. The Phoenix Tech Conference has withdrawn their invitation for him to speak. His assistant, you mean his mistress? A pause. Ms. Whitman has resigned from her position. The situation is becoming untenable for everyone involved. Madeline felt a surge of satisfaction that surprised her with its intensity. Good. After hanging up, she immediately called her father. Thomas listened to the conversation recap with the quiet attention of a man who'd spent decades dealing with intimidation tactics. They're scared, he said simply. That means you're winning. Is that what this is? Winning. Sweetheart, you're holding powerful people accountable for their actions. In my book, that's exactly what winning looks like. That afternoon, Camille burst through the front door with her laptop and a grin that could have powered the entire house. You need to see this, she said, settling onto the couch beside Madeline. Someone did some digging into Bradley's company finances. She pulled up a tech industry blog post titled The Hidden Costs of Executive Misconduct. The article detailed how Carter Technologies had seen a sharp decline in investor confidence following personal conduct issues involving the CEO. 2 partnerships had been terminated, and the company's valuation had dropped by 15% in 10 days. Look at this part, Camille said, scrolling down. They're calling it the authenticity crisis in tech leadership. Apparently, your videos have sparked a broader conversation about personal integrity in business. Madeline read over her sister's shoulder, absorbing the business terminology that reduced her pain to market trends and investor concerns. But beneath the corporate speak, she could see the real story. Bradley's carefully constructed image was crumbling. There's more, Camille continued. clicking to another tab. Remember Alyssa? The search results showed a LinkedIn profile that had been recently updated. Alyssa Whitman, formerly executive assistant at Carter Technologies, now listed herself as seeking new opportunities. Her professional headshot looked strained, and the confident smile from her old photos had been replaced with something that looked almost desperate. She's been blacklisted, Camille explained. Word travels fast in Denver's tech scene. No one wants to hire the woman who destroyed a marriage, especially not for a position requiring trust and discretion. Madeline stared at the screen, trying to process how she felt about Alyssa's professional downfall. Part of her felt vindicated. Actions had consequences, and Alyssa was finally facing hers. But another part felt something unexpected. Pity. She's young, Madeline said quietly. She made a terrible choice, but she's young. She's old enough to know the difference between right and wrong, Camille replied firmly. And she's old enough to face the consequences of her decisions. That evening, Madeline filmed a different kind of video. Instead of talking about her own experience, she addressed the question that had been flooding her comments. What's happening to them now? I want to be clear about something, she said, looking directly into the camera. I never set out to destroy anyone's career or reputation. I simply told my truth. If that truth has consequences for the people who hurt me, that's not my responsibility. It's theirs. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Some of you have asked if I feel guilty about the professional fallout they're experiencing. The honest answer is no. For 6 months, they made choices that prioritized their desires over my well-being, over our unborn daughter's well-being, over basic human decency. Those choices had victims. Now they have consequences. The camera captured her growing stronger as she spoke, her voice gaining the kind of authority that came from someone who had stopped apologizing for taking up space. I'm not celebrating their pain, she continued, but I'm not responsible for protecting them from the natural results of their actions either. That's not my job anymore. My job is to take care of myself and my daughter, and to use my voice to help other women do the same. The video garnered her biggest response yet. Over 300,000 views in the first 12 hours, with comments praising her balanced approach to accountability. But the message that meant the most came from an unexpected source. Her former neighbor in Denver, Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who had always waved from her garden when Madeline walked past. Dear Madeline, the message read, I wanted you to know that what you're doing is important. In my 78 years, I've watched too many good women stay quiet about bad treatment. You're changing that. Your daughter is lucky to have you as a mother. That night, as Madeline prepared for bed, Harper performed her usual evening gymnastics routine. The baby's movements had become stronger and more frequent as Madeline's stress levels decreased, as if Harper could sense that her mother was finally, truly fighting for both of them. We're okay, little one, Madeline whispered to her belly. We're more than okay. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. Outside her window, the Colorado mountains stood silhouetted against the star-filled sky, ancient, enduring, and unshakable, just like the woman she was becoming. At 32 weeks pregnant, Madeline had become something she'd never imagined, a voice for women who'd lost their own. Her following had exploded to over 800,000 across all platforms, with brand partnerships offering more money than she'd ever made in her previous life. But it wasn't the numbers that mattered. It was the messages that arrived daily from women around the world, sharing their own stories of betrayal, strength, and recovery. Good morning, beautiful souls, she said into her phone camera, settling into the corner of her father's living room that had become her unofficial studio. Natural light streamed through the windows, highlighting the healthy glow that had returned to her skin as her stress levels normalized. Today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind a lot lately, the difference between being alone and being lonely. 7 weeks ago I thought losing my marriage meant I'd lost everything. But sitting here now, feeling Harper doing her morning dance party, I realize I've never felt less alone in my life. She paused, her hand moving to the pronounced curve of her belly where their daughter had grown strong and active. I have hundreds of thousands of you sending love and support. I have a father who's proven that real men protect the women they love, not betray them. I have a sister who dropped everything to help me rebuild. And I have this little girl who reminds me every day that the best things in life aren't planned. They're discovered when you're brave enough to walk away from what's killing you. The comments started flowing immediately. Heart emojis, words of encouragement, and stories from other women who'd found strength in solitude. Madeline read them between contractions. Braxton Hicks this time, her doctor had assured her. Just practice runs for the real thing. Her phone rang as she was responding to comments. Dr. Winters's name appeared on the screen. "How are you feeling about the birth?" Dr. Winters asked after they'd exchanged pleasantries. "Are you nervous about going through labor without a partner?" "Actually, no," Madeline said, surprising herself with the honesty. "Camille will be there and my dad. The people who've proven they'll show up when it matters. That feels like more than enough." "That's remarkable growth, Madeline. Do you remember how you felt when you first came to see me?" "Like I was broken," Madeline admitted. "Like I'd never be whole again. And now? Now I feel like I was never actually broken. Just trapped in someone else's version of who I was supposed to be." That afternoon, while Madeline was filming a collaboration video with another creator about financial independence after divorce, Camille burst through the front door with an expression that was equal parts excitement and concern. "You need to see this," she said, holding up her phone. The screen showed a local news website with the headline, "Local Tech CEO Attempts Public Apology to Estranged Wife." Below it was a photo of Bradley standing outside the gates of her father's neighborhood, holding what appeared to be a handwritten sign. "He's been there for 3 hours, Camille said. "The neighbors called the police twice, but he's technically on public property." Madeline felt her stomach tighten, but not with the old anxiety. This was something different, a protective instinct that had nothing to do with Bradley, and everything to do with the life growing inside her. "What does the sign say?" Camille hesitated, then turned the phone toward her. The image showed Bradley looking haggard and desperate, holding a poster board that read, "Madeline, please give me a chance to explain. I love you and Harper. I'm getting help." "He looks terrible," Madeline observed, studying the photo with clinical detachment. The man in the image bore little resemblance to the confident executive who'd kissed his assistant in their bedroom 2 months ago. His hair was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled, and his face carried the weight of someone who'd finally understood what he'd lost. "He's been calling the local news stations," Camille continued, "trying to get them to cover his redemption story. Most of them have declined, but Channel 7 ran a brief segment about public apologies in the social media age." Thomas appeared in the doorway, his lawyer's instincts fully activated. "I've already called the police to document this. It's not technically harassment since he's on public property, but we want a record in case he escalates." "He won't," Madeline said with certainty that surprised even her. "This isn't about me. It's about salvaging what's left of his reputation. He thinks a grand gesture will make him look like the devoted husband fighting for his family." "Do you want to see him?" Camille asked carefully. Madeline was quiet for a long moment, considering. 3 months ago, the sight of Bradley looking broken and desperate would have shattered her resolve. She would have wondered if she was being too harsh, if love meant giving second chances, if Harper deserved to have her father in her life. Now, looking at the photo, she felt nothing but a deep, settled certainty. "No," she said simply. "I don't want to see him. I don't want to hear his explanation. I don't want his apology or his promises to change or his declarations of love. I want him to respect my decision and leave us alone." "Should I call him?" Thomas asked. "Tell him to leave?" "No," Madeline said again, this time with a small smile. "Let him stand there. Let him hold his sign and make his desperate appeals to the cameras. Every minute he spends trying to manipulate public opinion instead of genuinely changing his behavior just proves that I made the right choice." That evening, Madeline filmed what would become one of her most powerful videos yet. She sat in her father's garden, the setting sun creating a golden backdrop, and spoke directly about the public apology attempt. "Someone asked me today if I felt bad seeing my ex-husband looking so desperate and broken," she began, her voice steady and clear. "And I want to be honest with you about my answer." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I feel the same way I'd feel watching anyone face the consequences of their choices, hopeful that they'll learn from the experience, but not responsible for managing their pain. Real apologies don't require an audience. Real change doesn't need a camera crew. And real love doesn't cheat on you for 6 months while you're carrying their child." Harper kicked strongly, as if agreeing with her mother's words. "I've learned something important these past few months," Madeline continued. "Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to rescue them from their own consequences. Sometimes walking away is the kindest gift you can give, to them, to yourself, and to the children who are watching how you handle being treated badly." The video went viral within hours, with comments praising her strength and wisdom. But the message that touched her most came from a teenage girl in Ohio. "Watching you has taught me what self-respect looks like. Thank you for showing me that I never have to accept less than I deserve." As Madeline prepared for bed that night, Harper's movements strong and regular beneath her hands, she realized that Bradley's desperate public display had given her something unexpected, absolute clarity about the path forward. She was done looking back. Tomorrow, she would keep building the life that truly belonged to her. The contractions started at 3 a.m. on a Thursday, exactly 36 weeks into her pregnancy. Madeline woke to a tightening sensation across her belly that felt different from the practice contractions she'd been experiencing for weeks. This was deeper, more purposeful, accompanied by a low ache in her back that made her breath catch. "It's time," she whispered to the darkness, her hand moving to Harper's restless movements. Her daughter seemed to know something was happening. The kicks were stronger, more insistent, as if she too was ready to meet the world. Thomas drove them to the hospital through the pre-dawn darkness, Camille in the back seat timing contractions with the app on her phone. 4 minutes apart, she announced as they pulled into the emergency entrance, lasting about a minute each. "Little early, but not dangerously so," Thomas said, though Madeline could hear the worry beneath his calm tone. "Harper's ready to make her grand entrance." The next several hours passed in a blur of medical checks, monitoring equipment, and the steady rhythm of labor. Dr. Nowak confirmed that this was the real thing. Harper was coming whether they were ready or not. "Everything looks good," she assured Madeline between contractions. "Baby's heart rate is strong and you're progressing beautifully." She just decided she was done waiting. Madeline was in active labor, riding through a particularly intense contraction, when the nurse approached with an uncomfortable expression. "Mrs. Carter, there's someone here who says he's the baby's father. He's requesting to be present for the delivery." The contraction passed, leaving Madeline breathless but clear-headed. She looked at Camille, who was gripping her hand with protective fury, then at her father, whose jaw had tightened with barely controlled anger. "Bradley's here?" Madeline asked. "He says he has parental rights," the nurse continued apologetically. "Security is keeping him in the waiting area until you decide." For a moment the room was silent except for the steady beep of the fetal heart monitor, Harper's strong, steady heartbeat that had carried them both through the darkest months of their lives. "What are you thinking?" Camille asked gently. Madeline closed her eyes, feeling Harper shift inside her as another contraction began to build. In her mind, she could see Bradley in the waiting room, probably pacing, probably rehearsing what he would say if she let him in, probably believing that witnessing his daughter's birth would somehow erase 6 months of betrayal and lies. "I'm thinking about what I want Harper's birth story to be," Madeline said, as the contraction peaked. "I'm thinking about the people who were here for the hardest parts and the person who created the hardest parts." She breathed through the pain, supported by her sister's steady presence and her father's unwavering love. These were the people who had shown up when her world collapsed. These were the people who had celebrated every small victory and held her through every moment of doubt. "I'm also thinking about forgiveness," she continued, as the contraction subsided, "and how sometimes the most forgiving thing you can do is refuse to pretend that everything is okay when it's not." Thomas squeezed her other hand. "Whatever you decide, sweetheart, we support you." Madeline looked around the room, at the monitors tracking Harper's well-being, at the supplies prepared for her arrival, at the faces of the people who had proven their love through actions, not just words. Another contraction was building, stronger this time, and with it came absolute clarity. "Tell him no," she said firmly. "Tell him that he forfeited his right to be here when he chose to betray us. Tell him that Harper's first moments in this world will be filled with love from people who've earned the right to witness them." The nurse nodded with what looked like relief. "I'll let security know." "Wait," Madeline added, her voice growing stronger. "Tell him one more thing. Tell him that if he truly loves his daughter, he'll respect this boundary. He'll get the help he claimed he was getting. He'll build a life worthy of being part of hers, and he'll wait for the day when she's old enough to decide for herself if she wants a relationship with him. And tell him," Thomas added, his lawyer's voice cutting through the emotional tension, "that any attempt to force contact or manipulate the situation will result in a restraining order. We have documentation of everything." As the nurse left to deliver the message, Madeline felt something she hadn't expected. Relief. Not the bitter satisfaction of revenge, but the deep peace that came from making a decision based on love rather than fear. "You did the right thing," Camille said, smoothing her sister's hair. "I know," Madeline replied, and she meant it. "Harper deserves to come into the world surrounded by people who choose her every day, not just when it's convenient." The contractions were coming faster now, each one bringing their daughter closer to her first breath. Madeline thought about the millions of women who had followed her journey, who would hear this story and understand that sometimes love meant saying no. Sometimes protection meant closing doors. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was refuse to give someone else the power to hurt you again. "Here comes another one," she said, feeling the familiar tightening begin. "And I think this might be." The contraction hit with an intensity that took her breath away, different from all the others. Through the pain, she heard Dr. Nowak's voice. "Okay, Madeline, it's time to push. Your daughter is ready to meet you." In that moment, with her sister holding one hand and her father holding the other, Madeline understood that this was exactly how it was supposed to be. Harper would be born into a circle of people who had chosen to love them both without conditions, without betrayal, without the need for second chances. She took a deep breath, gathered all the strength she'd built over the past months, and prepared to bring her daughter into a world where they would never again accept less than they deserved. "Let's meet Harper," she said, and pushed toward the future that belonged to them alone. Harper Madeline Bell came into the world at 7:43 a.m., weighing 6 pounds and 2 ounces of pure determination. She arrived with a cry that filled the delivery room, strong, clear, and unmistakably announcing her presence to anyone within hearing distance. Dr. Nowak placed her immediately on Madeline's chest, and in that first moment of skin-to-skin contact, everything else in the world faded away. "Hello, beautiful girl," Madeline whispered, tears streaming down her face as she looked into Harper's dark eyes, eyes that held no knowledge of betrayal or heartbreak, only the infinite possibility of a life that would be built on truth from the very beginning. Harper had wisps of auburn hair that caught the morning light streaming through the hospital windows, and when she wrapped her tiny fingers around Madeline's thumb, it felt like the strongest grip in the world. "She's perfect," Camille breathed, her own eyes filled with tears as she took her first photo of her niece. "Look at those lungs. She's definitely a Bell woman." Thomas stood at the foot of the bed, openly weeping with joy and pride. "She has your mother's chin," he told Madeline, his voice thick with emotion. "And your strength. I can already tell." The next few hours passed in the blissful haze of new motherhood. Harper latched perfectly for her first feeding, slept peacefully in Madeline's arms, and seemed completely unbothered by her slightly early arrival. Dr. Nowak pronounced both mother and daughter healthy and strong. "Any word from the waiting room?" Camille asked quietly when the medical team had finished their checks. "Security said he left about an hour ago," the nurse replied. "No disturbances." Madeline felt only relief. Harper's first day in the world had been exactly what she'd hoped for: peaceful, surrounded by love, unmarked by drama or manipulation. That evening, as visiting hours ended and the hospital settled into nighttime quiet, Madeline sat by the window holding her sleeping daughter. The city lights of Fort Collins twinkled below them, and for the first time in months, she felt completely at peace. Her phone buzzed with a text from her lawyer. "Custody paperwork filed today. Given documented abandonment during pregnancy and your decision to exclude him from birth, you have strong grounds for primary custody. He can request visitation when he's ready to prove stability." Madeline deleted the message without responding. Legal matters could wait. Tonight was about beginnings, not endings. She opened her camera app and positioned it carefully, Harper sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Hi everyone," she said softly to the camera. "I want you to meet someone very special. This is Harper Madeline Bell, and she arrived this morning at exactly the right time." Harper stirred slightly but didn't wake, her tiny features relaxed and content. "I've been thinking a lot about her name," Madeline continued. "Harper means harp player, someone who creates beautiful music. And I realized that's exactly what this whole journey has been about, taking broken strings and discord and somehow creating something beautiful." She paused, looking down at her daughter's peaceful face. 6 months ago, my life exploded. I thought it was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. But sitting here now, holding this perfect little person who exists because of that explosion, I understand something I couldn't see before." Harper made a soft sound in her sleep, and Madeline's voice grew stronger with conviction. "Sometimes what feels like destruction is actually construction. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted makes room for everything you actually needed. Sometimes the most devastating thing that happens to you is actually the thing that sets you free." She looked directly into the camera, her green eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. "I'm not the same woman who found her husband cheating 6 months ago. That woman was living someone else's version of her life. This woman," she gestured to herself, then to Harper, "this woman is living her own truth. and it's better than anything I could have planned." Harper yawned and settled deeper into her mother's arms, completely secure in the love that surrounded her. "To everyone who's been following this journey, thank you for reminding me that I wasn't alone. Thank you for sharing your own stories and showing me that survival is possible. Thank you for proving that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is refuse to accept less than you deserve." Madeline shifted Harper slightly, marveling at how perfectly she fit in her arms. "I want to tell you what I'm going to teach my daughter," she said, her voice growing strong with maternal determination. "I'm going to teach her that love doesn't hurt, that trust isn't naive, it's a gift that should be treasured, not exploited, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what's familiar and choose what's right." Harper's breathing was steady and peaceful, the sound of absolute contentment. "I'm going to teach her that she never has to make herself smaller to make someone else comfortable, that her voice matters, that her instincts are valuable, that she deserves to be chosen every single day by the people who claim to love her." The camera captured mother and daughter in the soft glow of the bedside lamp, two people who had already survived their first challenge together and emerged stronger. "Most importantly," Madeline concluded, "I'm going to teach her by example. I'm going to show her what it looks like to build a life based on self-respect, authentic relationships, and the courage to start over when something isn't serving you." Harper stretched in her sleep, a tiny smile crossing her features, and Madeline felt her heart expand with a love she'd never imagined possible. "This isn't the life I planned," she said to the camera, her voice filled with wonder. "It's so much better than anything I could have planned." She turned off the recording and set the phone aside, focusing entirely on the miracle in her arms. Outside the window, dawn was beginning to break over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Harper opened her eyes for a moment, looking up at her mother with the profound trust that only newborns possessed. In those dark eyes, Madeline saw their future, bright, honest, and completely their own. "Welcome to the world, baby girl," she whispered. "We're going to have the most amazing adventure." And for the first time in her life, Madeline knew with absolute certainty that everything was exactly as it should be. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Madeline's new apartment in Fort Collins as she adjusted the camera angle for her daily live stream. Harper, now 6 months old, sat in her high chair babbling contentedly while playing with colorful blocks, a perfect picture of a thriving, happy baby. "Good morning, beautiful souls," Madeline said to the camera, her voice carrying the warm confidence of a woman who had found her true calling. "Harper and I wanted to share some exciting news with you today." Harper chose that moment to clap her hands and squeal with delight, as if she understood the significance of the moment. Her auburn curls caught the morning light, and her bright eyes sparkled with the kind of joy that only comes from being deeply loved and completely secure. "As many of you know, our little family has grown in ways I never expected," Madeline continued, lifting Harper from her high chair and settling her on her lap. "What started as me sharing my story of survival has become something so much bigger." She held up a letter with official letterhead, her hands steady and proud. "I've been offered a book deal to tell our complete story, not just the betrayal, but the rebuilding. The publisher wants to call it Unbroken: A Mother's Guide to Starting Over, and all proceeds above my basic needs will go to a foundation I'm starting for women leaving difficult relationships during pregnancy." Harper grabbed at the letter and Madeline laughed, the kind of genuine, unguarded laugh that had become her trademark in recent months. "She's my little business partner," Madeline said, kissing the top of Harper's head. "Everything I do now, I do with her future in mind. Not just financial security, but the kind of future where she grows up knowing that her mother chose courage over comfort, truth over convenience." The apartment around them was modest but filled with warmth, photos of Harper's milestones, thank you cards from women whose lives had been changed by Madeline's story, and artwork from Thomas's students who had adopted Harper as their unofficial class mascot. "I want to tell you something important," Madeline said, her voice growing more serious as she looked directly into the camera. 6 months ago, I thought my story was ending. I thought betrayal was the worst thing that could happen to me. But sitting here now, watching my daughter discover the world with pure joy, I understand that my story was just beginning." Harper babbled something that sounded suspiciously like "mama," and Madeline's face lit up with pride. "Every day I get messages from women who tell me that our story gave them permission to leave situations that were slowly killing their spirits. Women who've started their own businesses, left toxic relationships, reconnected with their own voices. That's Harper's legacy already at 6 months old. She's part of a movement that's changing how women see their own worth. She shifted Harper to face the camera, where the baby immediately reached toward the lens with curious fingers. I used to think that a broken family was the worst thing I could give my daughter, Madeline continued. Now I know that an authentic family, even if it looks different than what we planned, is the greatest gift I could ever offer her. The doorbell rang, and Madeline smiled at the camera. That's probably Grandpa Thomas with our weekly grocery shopping adventure. Harper has him completely wrapped around her tiny finger. As if on cue, Thomas's voice called from the hallway. "Where's my granddaughter? I brought her favorite books." Harper squealed with recognition and excitement, bouncing in her mother's arms. "Before we go," Madeline said to the camera, "I want to leave you with something I've learned. Rock bottom wasn't the end of my story. It was the foundation for everything beautiful that came after. Sometimes you have to lose the life you plan to discover the life that's waiting for you." Harper clapped her hands again and Madeline stood up, holding her daughter close. "Thank you for being part of our journey," she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "Thank you for reminding me that I was never alone, even in my darkest moments. And thank you for showing me that sometimes the most broken things can be rebuilt into something even more beautiful than they were before." Harper babbled what sounded like bye-bye, and waved her tiny hand at the camera, melting hearts across the internet. "We love you all," Madeline concluded. "And remember, you're stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and worthy of so much more than you might realize right now." As she reached to turn off the camera, Harper grabbed her mother's face and planted a wet baby kiss on her cheek. The camera caught it all. The spontaneous love, the genuine laughter, and the unmistakable glow of a woman who had not just survived but transformed her pain into purpose. The video would go on to receive over 5 million views. But the number that mattered most to Madeline was one: Harper's bright smile as she discovered that the best stories don't end with happily ever after. They begin with, "And then she chose herself." When you've lost everything you thought defined you, would you have the courage to discover who you were always meant to be? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like to help me out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.